Thank you, everybody. Sounds like we're going to have a victory tomorrow, right? Great. It'll be a victory for liberty. There's no doubt about it. I've been doing very little traveling around campaigning lately. I'm taking a little break. But this one I came to because I know your candidate, Ken, is a defender of liberty, and Virginia should not be giving up on liberty. If you elect that other guy, you are. That means this is very, very necessary to keep Virginia on the right track. I think there was a famous president by the name of Jefferson that came from here. So we want to keep it at Jefferson State. Now, this is great, and Ken's already proven his points about taking on the federal government, because that's what the whole issue is here. It's the federal government, the size of the federal government, and whether or not we stand up to the federal government. Now, I'll tell you what, it looks like the Democrats are giving us a gift now, and it's called Obamacare. That is a political gift, I'm sure. No, this Obamacare is a monster. And for this reason, Kent, of course, Ken knew this and took the federal government on. But I've always seen local government. I'm not down in local government politics. I very much have been involved in, things like getting rid of the Federal Reserve and a couple of few things like that. But And you do know that the states have some obligations on the monetary issue, too. The states can use only gold and silver as legal tender, so the movement is in the states as well. But this is a wonderful opportunity for us to make a strong point, because this state has been targeted. Ken has been targeted because they want to humiliate those who will stand up against the federal government. Now, the Constitution was clearly written. Of course, they didn't give us the 16th Amendment, and that was, a real undermining of our system. But we don't talk a whole lot about the 17th Amendment. And that undermined the principle and the importance of the states. And Jefferson obviously was a clear leader on the principle of nullification. I've been working on the assumption that nullification is going to come. It's going to be a de facto nullification if it's not legalized, because pretty soon things are going to get so bad that we're just going to ignore the feds and run our own lives in our own states. The most important thing you can think about doing is making sure that the states don't deteriorate into Detroits all around the country. And I tell you what, that is a risky that we're taking right now, because there's so many states and cities in a mess, and the importance of the state is very, very important. And standing up to the federal government, I believe not only that the 17th Amendment undermined that, but the purpose of local officials, the purpose of a governor, the purpose of an attorney general, the purpose of a mayor, the purpose of a sheriff, it was originally intended to stand up and represent the people for an intrusion of your rights and your liberty by a federal government. And that is the reason that exists. For the same reason, guess what? The founders were very clear about the Second Amendment. I keep saying, the Second Amendment wasn't set up there to make sure you could shoot rabbits. The Second Amendment was there, and they explicitly said, when you have an overly intrusive government and when tyranny comes, then that is a problem. And right now, today, we have a greater threat on our liberties internally. We take an oath of office to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, tell you what, there's no country on the verge of invading this country and destroying us from the outside. But believe me, the McAuliffes of the world and the Obamas of the world will come and they undermine our liberties. They've been doing it, and it's going to take strong people to stand up and say enough is enough. We don't want any more overbearing federal government. And if you don't want more government, what else don't you want? You don't want any more taxes. Anybody conceivably who would vote for somebody that would endorse a mileage tax, I mean, that's insane. What kind of invasion of privacy is that in? And what are they going to do with the money? Just waste it? So I would say anybody who would endorse that has to have something wrong. And I understand Ken is quite correct on the tax issue. No new taxes. Get rid of every tax you conceive of. Of course, that also means you have to cut some spending. But you know, nothing happens unless the people are behind us, behind the politicians who want to do things. And that is why you need a strong leader, to get the people to understand what is going on. But it's getting easier. You know, people look at it and say the foreign policy's in shambles, the wars have gone terribly, and the economy's in bad shape, and they're spying on everybody. But you know, how could I be optimistic about that? Why should I be sort of looking at this as an opportunity? Because the federal government has lost all credibility. And the one thing we don't need is somebody who's tied to that motive to just expand the government. I think personal civil liberties are obviously very important. I call myself a libertarian, and if anybody wants to wonder what that is, that's a strict constitutionalist. Now, I don't know whether Ken calls himself a libertarian or not, but I know he's a constitutionalist, so he's an ally. But those who complain about conservatives and limited government people are always saying, and I've had this said to me by other members of Congress, well, we have to do this for them. We have to take care of them from cradle to grave. We have to protect them against all these evil events because they're not smart enough. The people aren't smart enough to take care of themselves or spend their own money. They've said this to me. But then when you think about it, if they're not smart enough, how come it is if individuals aren't smart enough to take care of them, why should we grant this authority to a few thugs who want to take over the government to make all our decisions for us? The difference between the two societies, one free and one dictatorial, is authoritarianism. Those who want big government are authoritarians. They believe in the use of force, and they believe they're all wise and that you don't have the ability to know how to spend your money and take care of yourself. Now, you know, it gets pretty bad when we find out the NSA is spying on everybody around the world and in our country, and yet it is pretty bad when you hear somebody who is just a mayor of some little old city up north that says that he's going to tell you how big a drink you're allowed to have. You know, that's pretty bad, and we don't need that type of an attitude, and that's what it's made of. People who think they know what's best for everybody else. But we live in a very precarious time, and I think that whoever's governor, whoever's in office, they're going to meet a lot of challenges because, let me tell you, this recession is not over. The recession hasn't ended, and even though there's spots, and Texas happens to be one spot where the economy seems to be going well, but it's structurally defective. We live in an age where Keynesian economics is failing, and these debts cannot, yes, we'll celebrate. But it's tremendous opportunity for us to be in a place to make this point that all of a sudden, you know, our views are respected now more than ever. Because I can remember over the years, I first went into office in the 1970s, and I loved to go to the college campuses, and if I could get 35 or 40 people, I still went, you know, and talked to them one at a time, you know, get a supporter one at a time. But now it's different. The college campuses, what are they doing? They're waking up and finding out we've overextended ourselves, that they have debt, they don't have good jobs, and they know there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the monetary system, there's something wrong with our foreign policy system, and there's something wrong with this whole notion about government planning. So this, to me, is a wonderful opportunity. I especially am delighted with the response for the freedom ideas with the young people, because if you want to change the country, you got to reach the young people. And I see a lot of young faces out here, and that means that we can change it. But But we have to know what we believe in, and it's been alluded to, I'm quite sure, very often in this campaign, and that has to do with liberty. What is liberty all about? Does liberty mean license? Does liberty mean you can do anything you want? No, there are rules. A lot of times people accuse me, oh, you're a laissez-faire capitalist. You'll let business people do anything at all. No, that isn't the case. You can't steal, you can't rob, and you can't counterfeit. That's why we have to restrain the government. My most popular bumper sticker sat on my desk for a long time in Washington. Some of you might have seen it on the internet. It says, "Don't steal, the government hates competition." But that's because they do not understand the morality of what government does. And, you know, I have frequently over the years mentioned the book Bastiat. Bastiat comes up with a very simple principle that if you and I can't do it, we can't steal from our neighbors. And fortunately, our society still accepts that as a basic principle. You can't steal, rob, or hurt other people. But at the same time, people want the government to do it. They go to the congressman. The congressman becomes sort of a delivery boy. Okay, I can get this for you. And they would go up and play these games, and they would get the money for the district and get all these things. But, you know, it's coming to an end because the money is in there, and we're dealing with a debt that's exponentially growing, and it's going to continue to grow. And yet we still have to deal with the whole issue, what is liberty all about? Liberty means that we get a right to our life, and we have a right to our life not because of anything that government does, but because it comes to us in a natural, God-given way. That's where we get our life and our liberty. All life should be precious, and when you understand that, individuals should all share this, because if you understand it, some people use their liberty in one way and some people abuse their liberties. But if you're going to allow people freedom of choice, you can't regulate economics and you can't regulate social behavior and go into this, because all you do is you get divisiveness there. So what you want to do is legalize freedom. A strange idea, but I think it's a great idea. But freedom of choice means there's responsibilities, and that a lot of people will argue the case. Some people who are pseudo-capitalists and are crony capitalists, yes, they want freedom when they make profits to keep them, but if somebody else is there, then they want socialism, they want bailouts and everything else. So we have to know the great difference between these two. So it takes people who understand, like Ken does, about what liberty is all about, what the Constitution means, what the relationship between the states and the federal government should be. And, you know, as bad as things are, and I think they're bad, I'm actually pretty optimistic, mainly because of this tremendous opportunity, this tremendous chance right now of people, young people especially, waking up and realizing that we can't continue to do this. We have to change it. This is why this election is so important, because if you end up with that other guy, you know, and who's going to be nothing more than a buddy of Obama and Bloomberg, I mean, what more harm could you ask for yourself? Which means that, you know, you say, well, it's late in the game. What are we going to do? Well, you still have a telephone. You still can call some people. You can still get some people out. The vote is decided tomorrow. And you know, a month ago, they said this race wasn't going to be close. This week, they said it's going to be close. And I won my first election in a special election, and I was completely convinced it was a fluke because I had no idea, because I just was speaking out against the monetary system. And anyway, I ended up, and I had to go. I won, so I had to go to Washington. But, you know, I didn't understand much about politics, and it was a special election, so it was less than a year. I had to run again, and I lost. And the vote was, the night of the vote, I think there were about 300,000 votes or something. No, it was about 200,000 votes, and I lost by 98 votes. And, oh, well, there goes that career. That didn't last long. But then we asked for a recount, which they wouldn't perform efficiently enough. But then we had a court contest. And we found 1,300 of just addresses that voted. I mean, we had one sheet of paper where everybody's signature on the one page was all the same handwriting. So we thought we had a pretty good case. So we took it to the courts and they threw it out. We took it to the Congress and they threw it out, and we weren't able to restore that. But it's much better to stay away from that. Don't win by 98 votes. Win by thousands of votes tomorrow. That's what you have to do. One thing about a libertarian message is it's based on non-aggression. You can't do any harm against anybody else. And that's pretty simple. Most people would say they can do that. And it involves tolerance, because you tolerate people when they mess up and they spend their money, but they can't expect, the government to come and bail them out. And this is an issue that at one time I think we understood pretty well in America, but we've drifted a long way. We've had trouble slipping away for about 100 years. That 1913 was a bad year for us. Here we institutionalized our official counterfeiters in Washington. And I want to remind you, what the penalty was for counterfeiting back in those days. In 1792, they passed a law that said if anybody got caught counterfeiting the money, they got the death penalty. They thought inflation was really a bad idea. But here we go. Right now, you're more likely to go to prison if you mint gold and silver coins and start circulating them, because the government hates the competition. But there are so many opportunities for a good constitutional governor to make these points and fight these battles, because that's what you want. You don't want somebody to say, well, I know how to do this and that and be part of the system, and I know Obama, and if I run into trouble, I'll go to New York and talk to Bloomberg, and he's going to help us out and tell us how to write laws about how big your drink's going to be. No, we want somebody to stand up to the authoritarians. And authoritarians are dictatorial, and they produce, they're dictating everything, whether it's local or at a federal level. But at the national level especially, for it to exist, you end up with such an authoritarian government to convince the people that they have to keep doing this over and again. Guess what they end up doing? You probably won't believe this, and this is over the top. They actually lie to you, is what they do. And that is what we get endlessly. And it's on foreign policy, it's on domestic policy, it's on Obamacare. I think they've told a few big fibs about Obamacare. Now, Ken mentioned about the doctors being drafted, and essentially drafting, you're going to do this and that. Of course, when I was practicing medicine, I just drew the line. I'm not going to let the government ever interfere between my doctor-patient relationship, so I refused to deal with the government when it came to taking care of medicine. But the authoritarians don't believe in voluntarism. They don't believe it will work. They believe that everybody will be out in the streets if you don't do something. Now, the one thing the government does, the Constitution does permit, that if you have some type of a program that the people finally say, well, let's do this, there aren't that many prohibitions in the Constitution that tells the state what they can't do. So you sort these things out. The Constitution is written very clearly not to restrain you in any way whatsoever in your choices. It's written to restrain the government, the federal government. But you need somebody that understands the importance of property ownership. I believe that I can defend all civil liberties through the understanding of what private property is like. If it comes to speech or assembly, well, that's property. It's your church or whatever it is, your home. That is supposed to be protected. And the issue of property, which is crucial to understand this. But the liberal left believes that the property belongs to everybody and to nobody, and then what happens to that which the government owns, I mean, it deteriorates. They don't take responsibility. Just think of the difference between what people do when they own something and they're allowed to keep what they earn. You know, isn't that a wonderful thing? I talk a lot about the economy, but they always talk about, you know, the economy, we can get it going if everybody's willing to sacrifice. Tell you what, I tell my crowds, I say, what do you have to sacrifice for? What if I come and tell you, I'm going to get the government off your back and out of your wallet and out of your lives and let you keep what you earn? That's not a sacrifice. The people who get hurt are the ones who have been living off the government. That's where the real problem is. They live off the government, and they only want to send the people up there in special interests, and the corporations take over. And another thing that happens when that exists is that capitalism and freedom gets a bad reputation, because they think everybody and anybody who is rich and has earned money is a crony capitalist, which isn't true. When you earn your money honestly and you do a good job, whether it's the state level or the federal level, you shouldn't be penalized for it, and you shouldn't get bailed out either. But a lot of people want to lump it together, and they think the solution, this whole thing of Obamacare, the taxes involved there they're evil, because they're going to create class warfare, generational warfare. Because if you're young and you think, well, you know, I think I can handle it, I'll pay my bills and I'll have a medical savings account. No, you're the ones that are going to get stuck. They want to give medical care to a certain group, and they're going to pay for it by somebody who doesn't need the medical care. And that's going to upset a lot of people. And right now, the doctors are going to be quitting. You lose your insurance. So, you know, it will be so sad if they continue to benefit from this. I mean, this whole notion in Washington that was incessant, not that there was common sense told you, well, it was all the Republicans' fault because they wanted a close down. Well, that's what we ought to do. We ought to close down a lot of the government. I think is what we need. But they turned that into a negative and blamed it on the Republicans. And believe me, I'm not overly complimentary to the Republican Party a lot of times either, because sometimes they do the same thing. But I try to be as consistent as possible. When anybody promotes big government, you know, then that means that he's not a friend of freedom. And what we need in politics and in government and in governorships are individuals like Ken, who know the difference, who will make the difference. And I think he's established a reputation where you know he's not going to back down. And but you say, well, isn't that Obama? He didn't back down. He kept demagoguing and lying the whole time. He didn't back down. Yeah, but he was standing for the wrong things. That's the whole issue. You have to, you know, this whole idea that if you come together and do this and that and compromise on this, no, it's whether you do the right thing or not. When you know you're doing the right thing, you stick to your guns. Now, some people think, all that'll mean is fighting and fuming because he won't get along, nobody will get along with him. But you know what? You can work with coalitions. And I know in Washington it works. Some of the people that I could work with were principled progressives who agreed, say, on civil liberties. Why can't you work with a liberal on privacy? You know, there's no reason for that. We have more trouble with economics, but there's no reason why we can't get along with people. But the big thing is partisanship goes overboard. You know, if you can distinguish it, if you have a progressive, you think you're working with them, but Bush is president, that's why they're working with you, just to go after Bush, because he was making things. But as soon as a Democrat president is in, then it's all Democrat. So I think over-partisanship isn't good either. I think you have to look at the issues, look for your allegiance, and if you find somebody who will defend civil liberty and privacy, right now, we should be grabbing hold of this privacy issue. Guess who is the big progressive Democrat party person is Senator Feinstein. She's terrible on civil liberties. She now has a bill in to rewrite NSA, reform the bill. all she does is codify all the things they've been doing wrong. And this tells you one thing about legislation is be careful, because I know in Washington, I only speak from experience from Washington, if you ever look at the name of a bill and then read the bill is always opposite of what the name is. Can you think of anything more? The Affordable Care Act, something nobody can afford, and that's what it's called. And yet all they did to build the momentum for that was with a bunch of fibbing and lying about it. But I tell you what, it's ending. I mean, they can't dig their whole lot. They're not going to blame it on the computer. You know, it's a $600 million computer program, and it was at fault. There was this company we hired. Yeah, well, maybe somebody ripped taxpayers off, all of us paying for a computer system that doesn't work. Why don't we just believe in people, believe in freedom? Yes, it's not perfect, but let me tell you, when you get the imperfect individuals in Washington or any government, then you know it's going to affect all of us. And this is the reason why this race is so important, because if you can get Ken in there as governor, I think that you can rest much more peacefully than if that other guy gets in, because you can't expect any benefits at all. So it's always important to have a bottom line, and for me, the bottom line is liberty. Liberty coming from us, to us from our Creator. And if we understand that, it answers questions not only on civil liberties, it answers on economics, it answers on foreign policy, or what we can do and should do. And the founders understood this. There was a time when liberty was sort of a compact. You didn't have good libertarian conservatives over here and progressives over here and not agreeing on the whole thing. It's one issue. The founders understood this. They didn't talk about economic liberty and social liberty. It was one thing, the importance of the individual. And I think the important individual, as an OB doctor, it's important that we recognize that life is valuable even before it's born. You know, it's an issue that nobody likes to talk about. It's difficult, and there are problems, and I understand it from having some experience with people who have tragic circumstances. But the question to ask those who are so adamant to say that anything time you touch the subject, you're some sort of a radical, nutty person. But ask the person who says that, like in Texas, they just passed a law and they're fighting in the courts about whether or not you can abort a fetus after 20 weeks. Well, the doctor is sued. But then if you do kill the baby, you can be called into court. And a liberal never answers that question because they don't have an answer. Why should, if a girl delivers a baby and drowns the baby, gets rid of the baby, and then she's arrested for a homicide? But if she comes to a doctor and the doctor makes thousands of dollars during the abortion, that has to be resolved as a social matter. I don't think, matter of fact, I think that whole issue has to do with the morality of society. So the law itself is not going to solve that. So moral values are crucial. So the issue of liberty for me is a moral issue. And solutions out there. We enjoy the greatest country in the world. I think that we're in big trouble right now, a lot worse than it looks like on the surface. And I just think that we can restore this. There's no doubt in my mind. And I'm encouraged because there's a better understanding of economics. Conservatives now are saying no more NSA, better than the liberal Democrat who had all this reputation for privacy. And people are waking up and telling this president, don't start a new war. So I believe the people are waking up, and I hope and pray that they wake up tomorrow and elect Ken the new governor of Virginia.